Fenrir's appearance caused the four envoys at the front as well as the knight to change their expressions slightly. They had already guessed that there were still powerful enemies guarding the Abyss prison, but they never imagined that the one stationed here would be Loki's offspring, Fenrir. Strictly speaking, Fenrir is considered a divine beast in Norse mythology, but even so, its ferocity and terror are legendary. In the archives of the Upper Evil Society, there are many documented cases of Fenrir maiming several main gods from other divine realms. Fenrir's roar echoed throughout the prison. It clawed the ground fiercely with its four limbs and launched itself like a cannonball. The rolling malevolent energy surged like waves, causing the four envoys' clothes to flutter. The four pale masks gazed at the rapidly approaching Fenrir and calmly said, "According to the original plan, we will hold it back at the cost of our lives. You all quickly rescue the president. As long as the president gets out, we still have hope." Before coming here, the Upper Evil Society had simulated some situations they might encounter in the prison. Facing a guardian like Fenrir whose combat power clearly exceeded expectations, their only option was to rely on the combined strength of the four envoys to forcibly hold it back, buying time for the other members. But given the current state of the four envoys, how long they could hold against Fenrir remained unknown. The knight looked at them deeply without saying much, just nodding. "Good, hold on." Before his words faded, he led the other Upper Evil Society members, rushing quickly toward the deeper part of the prison. Malevolent energy enveloped Fenrir as it crashed down from midair. The four envoys growled, simultaneously opening their forbidden domains and charging toward Fenrir like a wall, forcibly blocking its advance. "What a huge wolf!" Bai Li Pangpang, who was rapidly approaching, exclaimed in shock upon seeing Fenrir battling the four envoys. "That's Fenrir. The four envoys are holding it back. Let's hurry, it would be troublesome if it catches up to us." Seeing the four envoys frantically delaying Fenrir, Lin Chia increased his pace. At their current level, even if they helped, they wouldn't make a decisive difference. Only by quickly rescuing Jinyan would the situation turn around. Lin Chia and his three companions swiftly passed the battlefield along the wall. But at that moment, Fenrir, who was battling the four envoys, turned its blood-red eyeballs and instantly locked onto Lin Chia's retreating figure. Lin Chia felt a chill on the back of his neck, and a sense of deadly crisis surged in his heart. This is bad. Lin Chia's heart sank and he had an ominous premonition. Fenrir stared fixedly at Lin Chia, suddenly roaring and enduring the damage from the four envoys. Its mountain-like body broke through the blockade and charged directly toward Lin Chia. Logically, Fenrir, engaged in fierce battle, shouldn't have noticed their existence, and even if it did, it wouldn't necessarily shift its target. But oddly, Fenrir locked onto him at this moment, and from its aura and gaze, Fenrir seemed to despise him. Lin Chia didn't know where Fenrir's hostility toward him came from, but judging from the result, it definitely had to do with the side effects of Star Coin. This damn luck. Lin Chia cursed inwardly and immediately turned to Enchinyu, saying, "I'll lure Fenrir away. You go rescue Jinyan. She's in the third-to-last cell on the bottom floor." Lin Chia had no time for further instructions. Fenrir's speed was far more astonishing than he had imagined. He could only mount the somersault cloud and race along the dark prison corridor. The prison floor trembled as a huge black shadow followed closely behind. Seeing Lin Chia suddenly being hunted by Fenrir, Chao Yuan and Bai Li Pengpeng's expressions changed, and they were about to chase after him when Enchinyu grabbed their shoulders. "7 knights will be fine. We must quickly rescue Jinyan. She's humanity's ceiling, only she can restrain Fenrir." The two men's expressions fluctuated, but eventually they gritted their teeth and chose to follow Enchinyu toward the depths of the prison. Lin Chia, feeling the malevolent energy pursuing him, grew increasingly solemn. Riding the somersault cloud, his eyes fully focused on what lay ahead, his figure flashed like lightning, constantly turning in the complex prison trying to shake off Fenrir. The Abyss prison's layout was intricate and fundamentally, it was just an underground jail. Using the somersault cloud in such a place was like driving a supercar at over 300 kilometers per hour through rural town alleys of the 80s and 90s. But Fenrir was too fast and its body was just the right size to squeeze through the corridors between the cells on both sides. The black malevolent energy rolled, looking like a black tsunami surging through city streets from a distance. Wolves are naturally skilled hunters, especially a demon wolf capable of tearing apart main gods. Without using the somersault cloud, Lin Chia would be caught by his pursuer in no time. But even with the somersault cloud pushed to its limit, the distance between them was rapidly shrinking. Lin Chia controlled the somersault cloud to maneuver through the prison while his mind raced, searching for ways to buy time. As the wolf's howl behind him grew closer, Lin Chia's gaze swept across the many dark cell doors on both sides, his eyes narrowing slightly. He gripped the Almonomurakumo sword in his hand and controlled the somersault cloud to fly close to the cells on the right, suddenly slashing the sword's edge toward those towering black prison pillars. At high speed, the Almonomurakumo sword, which could cut through anything, easily sliced through the prison pillars on one side, even cutting a crack in the divine power barrier sealed within the pillars. At the somersault cloud's speed, in the blink of an eye, the crack extended for kilometers along Lin Chia's retreating figure. 1,000-mile dike can be destroyed by an ant hole. Compared to these vast, deep cells, the crack left by the Almonomurakumo sword on the prison pillars was almost imperceptible. But for the beings imprisoned within, this crack was the key to their escape. As Lin Chia's figure flashed past, several prison pillars suddenly began to shake violently, and terrifying auras gushed out from the gaps in the seals, tearing the crack wider and wider. Bang! With a loud crash, a huge figure smashed through the black prison pillar, breaking free from the cell. The escape of this huge figure seemed to be some kind of omen. Within seconds, 3 more figures shattered their cell seals and slowly emerged from the swirling fragments of divine power. Oh no, the intruders have released the serious criminals from the second floor. Several members of the Nordic Battle Division who were rushing through the corridor saw Lin Chia holding the Kusanagi sword and tearing open a corner of the seal, their expressions instantly becoming extremely unpleasant. These seals can't even be broken by the main gods. How did a human manage to do it? Stop him quickly. It's too late, prisoners from 3 cells have already escaped. This is a major problem now. Amid the exclamations of the Nordic Battle Division, 3 figures stepped out from the prison cells. Their body sizes and skin colors were all different, as if they came from different countries, but they were all covered with hideous, twisted scars, as if caused by some kind of torture device. I'm out. These damn Nordic gods, don't think you can imprison me again. Among them, a burly Indian god who had been imprisoned for who knows how long, had messy hair scattered like a chicken's nest, but his voice was as resonant as a bell. Before his laughter had faded, a tsunami-like murderous aura surged from behind. A pair of crimson beast eyes emitted violent killing intent in the darkness, and Fenrir opened its bloody mouth, instantly tearing off half of the Indian god's body. Fool! A small figure shrouded in black mist growled, and without thinking turned and ran in the opposite direction. The second-to-last level of this abyss prison mostly held lesser gods from Asgard or other divine realms who had committed serious crimes. Facing the wolf Fenrir, they basically had no chance of winning. Another lesser god criminal who had escaped also didn't hesitate at all and turned to flee. Seeing these lesser god criminals being so spineless, Lin Chia, flying at the front, couldn't help but curse in his heart. This wasn't what he had imagined either. Logically, after he released these serious criminals imprisoned in the dungeon, shouldn't they be filled with hatred toward Asgard and engage in a bloody battle to wash away their humiliation? Just one Fenrir scared them into turning tail and running, which was too cowardly. Although he kept complaining in his heart, Lin Chia's Kusanagi sword showed no sign of stopping. Since these few lesser gods couldn't stop Fenrir, releasing more might have some effect. After all, if these criminals were released, Asgard would be the one with the headache. As the Kusanagi sword continued to cut through the divine power seals, one prison cell after another broke open from the inside, and figures flew out one after another. Some laughed wildly like the Indian god before, while others immediately sensed that something was wrong and chose to save themselves. But as these gods became more numerous, approaching 10 people, the situation began to change subtly. These gods who had broken out of prison looked at each other, gradually slowing down, and gazed somewhat maliciously at Fenrir who was chasing behind them. Fenrir, rapidly advancing through the corridor, also slowed down. Those crimson beast eyes stared at the 9 lesser gods gathered ahead, full of vigilance. A low growl came from within the cloud-like murderous aura as if warning them. The atmosphere suddenly froze. At this moment, a deep voice came from among the crowd. If we don't kill this thing, none of us will be able to escape. What are you waiting for? Have all those years in prison made your courage shrink? With so many of us, who hasn't spilled Nordic god blood? It's just a beast, let's kill it together. Kill it, I want to take revenge on Loki. You were also imprisoned by Loki? Humph, if he hadn't forced me to ambush Sif with his poisonous scheme, how could I have ended up here? Loki killed my child, I cannot live under the same sky as him. After we get out, we can join forces. Good, let's kill this beast first. As several lesser god criminals finished speaking, they simultaneously transformed into streams of light and flew toward Fenrir. The cloud-like murderous aura suddenly churned, and amid an ear-splitting wolf howl, the entire bottom of the dungeon began to shake violently. Nearby, Lin Chia removed the transformation magic on his body, changing that deep voice back to normal, and quietly retreated to the side. The first sentence just now was indeed started by him. Without giving these lesser god criminals some motivation, who knows how long they would have hesitated. However, he never expected that so many of them would have grudges against Loki. If it weren't for Loki, they might not have been so united. The dark dungeon was illuminated by the surging divine power, and Fenrir's howls echoed through the corridors, making Lin Chia's eardrums ache painfully. That massive black figure, like a mountain forged from steel, remained standing firm even when surrounded by 9 lesser gods. In this relatively narrow terrain, such a large-scale divine battle quickly caused vicious cracks in the surrounding walls. One prison cell after another collapsed with a rumble, and more criminals escaped and joined in the encirclement of the magic wolf. At this moment, strands of black threads suddenly appeared out of thin air, and the void above the battlefield immediately began to distort. Loki? Lin Chia was all too familiar with these black threads. His eyes contracted slightly and his heart immediately sank. According to the original plan, Loki should have been surrounded and killed by Si Xiaonan and number 27. Now that Loki had appeared again, didn't that mean? At the same time, the gods fighting with Fenrir changed their expressions. A trick. Loki is here. Damn. Of all times. Kill Loki first. Otherwise none of us will escape. Wait, that seems not to be Loki? Amid everyone's exclamations, Lin Chia also looked up at the air. Under the interweaving of countless black threads, a figure wearing a blood-stained black coat slowly walked out of thin air. The moment he saw that familiar face, Lin Chia's pupils contracted, and he opened his mouth in shock, his eyes full of disbelief. Xiaonan. Lin Chia clearly sensed that Si Xiaonan was emanating the aura of the trickery law. Could it be that she had become the new god of trickery? How was that possible? Even if she had killed Loki and obtained the trickery law, how did she solve the problem of divine dissolution? While Lin Chia was puzzled, Si Xiaonan, standing in midair, slowly looked down at the wolf Fenrir below, her eyes narrowing slightly. Seemingly sensing the aura of the law of trickery, the wolf Fenrir raised its head, its crimson eyes meeting with Si Xiaonan's in midair. It tilted its head slightly, confusion appearing in its eyes. Not Loki. Someone in the crowd spoke in surprise. Why is it a young girl? Where's Loki? Dead. How is that possible? Loki would die? Did the supreme god intervene? There's no mistake, she carries the law of trickery. She is the new god of trickery. The reputation of Loki, god of trickery, was so great that even these serious criminals imprisoned in the dungeon for who knows how long knew of his existence. Now seeing that the god of trickery had been replaced, they were all utterly shocked. Si Xiaonan, hovering in midair, paid no attention to these escaped serious criminals. She merely looked down at Fenrir below and slowly spoke. Loki is dead. From now on I am your master. Roar. Fenrir stared intently at Si Xiaonan, suddenly letting out a fierce howl. Its massive body launched upward, carrying terrifying murderous energy as it lunged to bite Si Xiaonan. After all, Fenrir was Loki's offspring. Even though Si Xiaonan carried the aura of the law of trickery, to it she was just a stranger. Si Xiaonan had killed Loki, so naturally it wouldn't accept this impostor as its father. The wild wind lifted the corners of her black coat as Si Xiaonan stood firmly in the air, as immovable as a rock. She coldly watched the murderous Fenrir, allowing its bloody maw to envelop her form. Just as the sharp fangs were about to close, a trick flashed from the depths of Si Xiaonan's pupils. Fenrir's form suddenly vanished into thin air, then crashed like a cannonball onto the thick ground. Countless brick fragments scattered as that massive body instantly created a crater more than 10 meters deep in the ground. No one saw clearly what Si Xiaonan had done. Those criminals who had previously surrounded Fenrir witnessed this scene, and their gazes grew solemn. They knew very well how strong the wolf Fenrir was. Even if several of them as minor gods joined forces, they couldn't gain the upper hand in such a short time. It seemed this new god of trickery was not much weaker than the previous Loki. The second human to become a god, Lin Chia murmured. Lin Chia clearly remembered that the Archangel Michael had once said that when humans become gods, all their faith comes from within themselves and doesn't rely on any divine system's origin. So although it was extremely difficult for humans to become gods, once they truly achieved it, they were directly equivalent to the level of chief gods in mythological pantheons. And Si Xiaonan controlled the most mysterious and enigmatic law of trickery. Having replaced Loki as the new god of trickery, her power naturally couldn't be weak. Fenrir could be seen shakily standing up from within the huge crater, shaking its head. Its hair stood up like black needles and unprecedented rage surged in its eyes. Others might not understand Si Xiaonan's attack, but Fenrir was very familiar with the law of trickery. In that instant just now, Si Xiaonan had used trickery to alter history, striking it back to the ground with one punch at the moment it leaped. Black murderous energy churned around its mountain-like body. It growled softly, raising its head, those crimson furnace-like eyes taking on a strange light. Its blood-red mouth, as large as a football field, opened wide, its ferocious fangs pointing toward the sky, biting down hard. Crack! As Fenrir's giant mouth closed, the dark ceiling of the dungeon was instantly torn open, and a ferocious bite mark was imprinted in the void. This bite mark penetrated Si Xiaonan's shoulder, bright red blood splashing out. Endless murderous energy surged from the void's bite mark, almost submerging Si Xiaonan's form. Si Xiaonan frowned slightly, but her expression didn't show much panic. Strands of black threads flowed through her eyes. It could actually bite through the void from such a distance? Seeing this, Lin Chia's heart immediately tensed. No wonder Loki had kept Fenrir in the Abyss dungeon during his lifetime, without even leaving another chief god to guard it. With such terrifying abilities, ordinary chief gods indeed couldn't restrain it. Among all the divine beasts Lin Chia had seen so far, Fenrir's combat power was definitely at the top. Si Xiaonan's form was bitten through by Fenrir, gradually submerged in the murderous energy. But Fenrir didn't relax. It opened its mouth, about to bite again, when a blurry afterimage instantly appeared above its head. A fair hand suddenly pressed down on Fenrir's skull. Surging divine might poured out, crushing the murderous energy around Fenrir, forcefully smashing its head back into the crater. Boom! The invisible shockwave nearly blew away several minor gods nearby. The blood-stained black coat fluttered in the fierce wind. A sharp cold light flashed in Si Xiaonan's eyes. Her shoulder, which had been bitten through by Fenrir, now showed no trace of injury. Si Xiaonan's hand pressed firmly on Fenrir's skull, her 5 fingers gripping tightly. Another rumbling sound rang out as Fenrir's form was smashed down further, just a hair's breadth away from breaking through to the lowest level of the dungeon. Dense cracks spread frantically from Fenrir as the center, dust flying everywhere. Unwilling howls continuously came from beneath Si Xiaonan's palm. Fenrir's enormous body trembled slightly, seemingly about to break free from Si Xiaonan's hand through brute force. At this moment, strands of black threads flew out from Si Xiaonan's palm, drilling like swimming snakes into Fenrir's 7 orifices. She coldly stared at Fenrir's head beneath her. At the junction of flesh and skull, a black trick was slowly taking form. Fenrir's raging crimson eyes gradually dispersed as this trick formed, finally sinking into deep confusion. Loki is dead. From now on I am your master. Si Xiaonan's lips parted slightly, calmly repeating the sentence she had said at the beginning. Countless threads poured into Fenrir's head, and that trick finally took shape. Si Xiaonan released her hand, her form drifting back to the ground like a specter. After some time, Fenrir's eyes finally regained their focus. But now the rage, unwillingness, and killing intent in its eyes had completely disappeared. It forcefully pulled its body out of the huge crater, its ferocious head bending slightly to nuzzle Si Xiaonan's hand below, appearing very affectionate. Si Xiaonan had used trickery to deceive its perception, replacing its father Loki in its memory with herself. Si Xiaonan calmly stroked Fenrir's hard fur, her form shifting as she flipped onto the wolf's back. Standing on the mountain-like Fenrir's back, amid the wolf's low growls, her gaze slowly swept over the dumbfounded criminals around her. She spoke flatly. Do you want to die, or do you want to live? A single Fenrir is enough to give these escaped criminals a headache, and now with the addition of a new god of mischief who is no weaker than Loki, such a combination is simply beyond what they can handle. The numerous criminals present immediately looked extremely uncomfortable. God of mischief, why is it you? One of the four-armed deities from Asgard's giant realm frowned and spoke. I've seen you before, you were Loki's proxy. I was thrown into prison just a month ago and Loki was still alive then. What happened outside? Loki is dead, Si Xiaonan said flatly. I killed him. Hearing this, the criminals were stunned, then their faces filled with disbelief. They carefully examined the young woman before them. Someone said she was once Loki's proxy, she should be human. But how could a human possibly kill Loki and become the new god of mischief? That's impossible, you're just a human. Someone immediately shook their head in denial. Roar. The Fenrir beneath Si Xiaonan let out a deep, angry roar. The visible sound waves instantly made the criminals instinctively step back. Those blood-red beast eyes stared fixedly at the deity who had spoken, with a very unfriendly expression. Si Xiaonan wasn't annoyed but calmly said, How I became the god of mischief doesn't matter. What matters is whether you want to die here, or leave Asgard alive and regain your freedom. The criminals exchanged glances, their brows slightly furrowed. What do you mean? Am I not being clear enough? Si Xiaonan paused, her calm eyes sweeping over everyone and nodded. Fine, let me put it more bluntly. Submit to me, or die. The divine might of a major deity and the ferocious aura of the magic wolf pressed down on everyone's hearts, and the air suddenly fell into dead silence. Hearing these words, the criminals' faces immediately turned ugly. These deities, some from Asgard itself and others foreign gods captured by the Norse gods, might not have reached the level of major deities, but being imprisoned here meant none of them were pushovers. Being threatened by a young girl who looked barely grown was an insult to them. But undeniably, this girl indeed had the strength to insult them. Whether it was the divine might of the god of mischief emanating from her or the ferocious and terrifying magic wolf beneath her, neither was in existence they could defeat. And with the two working together, even if all dozen or so minor deities imprisoned on this level were released, they would be no match. Si Xiaonan, wearing that blood-stained black coat, stood on the magic wolf's back, the cold gleam flashing in her eyes telling them, she wasn't joking. You only need to obey my commands until we leave Asgard. Once we're out of here, you can go wherever you want, I won't interfere. Si Xiaonan's additional statement made the deity's expressions soften somewhat. What exactly do you want to do? A voice came from the crowd. Si Xiaonan was silent for a moment. Revenge. Revenge? Against whom? Asgard. Si Xiaonan turned her head slightly, her gaze seeming to penetrate the prison walls to look at the magnificent divine realm with its temples, and gripping the sleeves of her black coat tightly, she spoke word by word. The suffering we've endured here these years. I will make Asgard pay it back double. Revenge against Asgard? Hearing this, all the criminals present had their eyes light up. They were all deities imprisoned in the abyss prison by the Norse gods. It was impossible not to harbor resentment after so many years, especially since several of them had irreconcilable grudges against Asgard. They had thought this new god of mischief was like Loki, a lackey of Asgard, but now it seemed that wasn't the case. You want to cause trouble for Asgard? Someone in the crowd immediately spoke up. Good, count me in. Me too, an Indian deity said grimly. I've been sick of these Norse bastards for a long time. The new god of mischief wants to move against Asgard. Interesting. I'll help you deal with Asgard, but you must guarantee that afterward, you'll let us leave this place and gain freedom. The criminals present ultimately chose to follow Si Xiaonan, regardless of whether they all truly had grudges against Asgard. In any case, they had just escaped with great difficulty and no one wanted to die here so easily. Si Xiaonan's gaze swept over them one by one, her peripheral vision falling on Lin Chia in the corner. Chia. Her figure flickered and she flashed to Lin Chia's front, examining him carefully for a long time. Finding no fatal injuries, her expression softened somewhat. How are you here too? Are you all right? During her confrontation with Loki, Si Xiaonan had heard that Loki had long prepared to deal with Lin Jie, which had worried her greatly. Now seeing Lin Jie standing here safe and sound, she finally put down the stone in her heart. I'm fine. Lin Jie shook his head with a bitter smile. But you, how did you become the god of mischief? Did you really kill Loki? Yes, we succeeded, Si Xiaonan nodded. What about Ling Xian? Didn't he come with you? Si Xiaonan's body trembled, her eyes quickly dimming. She opened her mouth, about to say something, when a deafening rumbling sound came from not far away. Boom. At the entrance to the second level of the prison, a dazzling burst of fire erupted, and a silver pixel motorcycle crashed through the smoke and flames, roaring toward them with a deep engine sound. And Qingyu carrying a black coffin on his back, Bailey Pangpang stepping on a taiji diagram, and Chao Yuan dragging his sword with a sinister smile followed closely behind her, and behind them was a large crowd of Upper Evil Society members. Silver hair danced wildly in the wind as the battered Jinyan gripped the motorcycle handlebars with both hands and shouted, Lin Jie, where are you? This lady is here to help you smash that Fenrir's dog head. Lin Jie. Si Xiaonan. The Fenrir under Si Xiaonan's feet. Roar. Fenrir roared toward the direction of Jinyan's rapid approach, its fur standing on end, its eyes fierce and grim. Wait, she's not an enemy. Si Xiaonan immediately moved to calm Fenrir's emotions. Jinyan. Lin Jie smiled helplessly and waved to her. Don't worry, I'm fine. Jinyan looked at Si Xiaonan, who was emanating divine might, and then at the obedient magic wolf Fenrir beneath her, momentarily confused. The Nightfall team and Upper Evil Society members who had rushed over behind her also froze in place. Jinyan scratched her head and tentatively asked, What's going on here? God of trickery? After listening to Lin Jie's description, Jinyan was shocked and opened her mouth wide. She seemed to recall something. You gave the immortality pill? Si Xiaonan silently nodded. Jinyan looked at Si Xiaonan with a complicated expression. She basically knew Si Xiaonan's plan, and knew that Si Xiaonan had intended to return the immortality pill to Great Xia from the beginning. After all, this pill was stolen by her, and with her character she would never keep the immortality pill for herself. During this time something else must have happened. It's fine, someone would have to take it eventually, Jinyan said consolingly. Si Xiaonan forced a bitter smile. By the way, I want to borrow something from you. What? Jaller. Hearing this name, Jinyan's gaze sharpened. Xiaonan, are you really sure about this? Yes. Si Xiaonan calmly nodded. The side effects of this thing are not small. Jinyan stopped halfway through her sentence, then smiled bitterly and said, I almost forgot you took the immortality pill. Never mind. Jinyan didn't try to persuade her anymore, but turned to speak to someone behind her. Give her Jaller. A knight carrying a black box stepped out from the crowd and solemnly handed it to Si Xiaonan. Seeing Jinyan so readily give her a supreme, divine artifact, Si Xiaonan felt warmth in her heart. Thank you, Si Xiaonan said sincerely. After everything is over, I will return it to Utopia. There's no rush, after all, I stole this thing anyway. Jinyan patted Si Xiaonan's shoulder and said seriously, whatever happens, take care of yourself. Don't worry, basically no one in this world can kill me now. Si Xiaonan smiled. Si Xiaonan put the black box on her back, her gaze falling on the passage leading to the lowest level in the distance, and said, I'm going to the lowest level of the dungeon. There are several major god-level prisoners there. I want to try to talk to them. You should leave first. Asgard will be very dangerous from now on. Si Xiaonan's fingertips rubbed against the black box containing Jaller, on her back, a cold gleam flashing in her eyes. Jinyan raised an eyebrow. Leave? I'm not leaving. I've done plenty of messing with divine realms. I must join in on this fun. Si Xiaonan looked at the alarming bloodstains on Jinyan's body and shook her head. Your injuries from the dungeon are too severe. You shouldn't take risks. It's nothing. I have a good constitution. These injuries are nothing. Jinyan carelessly patted her chest hard, accidentally pulling at her wounds, and suddenly spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Jinyan spat out a bloody phlegm, clicked her tongue, turned to look at the knight and others and said seriously, You all go back first. I want to play a bit longer. The Shangyi Association members. Play a bit longer. President, you look like you're on the verge of death. In the hearts of the Shangyi Association members, 10,000 horses galloped past. But, President, the knight seemed to want to say something more, but Jin Yan interrupted him. What? Not listening to the president's words anymore? You're injured, so leave first. I'm really fine. Oh, and when you get back, reserve the largest private room at the Utopia Club for me. After I'm done wrecking Asgard, we'll have a good celebration. Remember to find several male escorts to drink with me. Under Jin Yan's unquestionable tone, the knight and others exchanged glances and smiled helplessly. As you command. With Jin Yan having said this much, no matter how they objected, it would definitely be useless. After all, their purpose for this mission was only to rescue the president from Asgard's hands. Now that she had been rescued, whatever she wanted to do was up to her. Do you want to leave together? As the knight was about to leave, he glanced at Lin Chia and the others and asked proactively. Lin Chia pondered for a moment, then shook his head. We're not in a hurry. After all, we are a special team from Great Xia. Since the main forces of Great Xia haven't left yet, we can't leave either. Seeing Lin Chia say this, the knight nodded, turned around, and led the Shangyi Association members directly toward the opened Rainbow Bridge. Si Xiaonan also rode Fenrir down to the lowest level of the dungeon and disappeared. The chaotic dungeon suddenly quieted down. Lin Chia's group and Jin Yan remained in place, staring at each other with a group of sub-god-level criminals who had escaped from prison. What are you looking at? Jin Yan casually formed a new cloak from pixels to cover her blood-stained body and glared fiercely at these sub-gods. Are your injuries really okay? Lin Chia asked tentatively. Qingyu is half a doctor, why not let him take a look? Jin Yan looked at the silently smiling Qingyu with a strange expression and shook her head repeatedly. No thanks. I don't want to be dissected. My constitution is special, these injuries really aren't much, they'll heal soon. Seeing this, Lin Chia didn't say more, but remembered the mysterious black box she had given to Si Xiaonan earlier and asked curiously. By the way, what is Jaller? Mist. Antarctic ice sea. In the dead silent world of ice and snow, a giant floating ice mass the size of a third-tier city was slowly moving on the azure sea surface. Amid the swirling gray mist at the center of this floating ice, a figure wearing a blood-red divine robe, eyelashes trembling slightly, silently opened his eyes. Countless red insects rolled and writhed, forming an eerie red eyeball that seemed to see through the void before him, falling on some distant place. Loki is dead? Odin frowned slightly, murmuring. He sat on the floating ice like a stone sculpture. After a long time he finally sighed deeply and slowly stood up. Trying to control Asgard through conventional means is indeed impossible. Loki, you have disappointed me too much. Odin's tall figure stood majestically on the misty floating ice, with red insects frantically writhing in his eyes, looking grim and eerie. Suddenly, as if sensing something, he turned to look at a certain part of the mist. So persistent. Odin's eyes showed disgust. He hesitated for a moment but still took a step forward, his form instantly disappearing into the void, vanishing in the vast ice sea. 15 seconds later. A brilliant golden light streaked across the sky, crashing like a cannonball onto the floating ice where Odin had stood. Churning seawater mixed with large pieces of shattered ice was forcefully blasted into the air. 6 pure white wings extended from the golden light. Amid the scattered ice, Michael's furnace-like eyes burned fiercely. He escaped again. He snorted coldly, raised his head to look in the direction Odin had gone and frowned slightly. That direction is Horn of Destiny, omen of disaster? Upon hearing Jin Yan's introduction, Lin Chia asked with surprise, is this divine artifact really that mysterious? Perhaps at least that's what the legend says. Jin Yan shrugged. However, to blow this horn requires paying an enormous price. Even a major god could only blow it for 4 or 5 seconds at most. If those fools from the Knights really wanted to save me with this horn, they'd probably split apart before making a sound. I mean that literally. Is the magnitude of the disaster related to how long the horn is played? Not sure, but there should be some connection. Jin Yan pondered for a moment. Anyway, this thing is extremely mysterious. Ultimately, it's like a disaster indicator. The person who blows it may not necessarily be the one who truly causes the disaster. It's just a tool of fate. Perhaps the real source of the disaster has long been hidden elsewhere. Lin Chia nodded thoughtfully. How's the situation outside? Has the great Xia god arrived? Jinian asked. Lin Chia briefly recounted the situation and Jinian raised an eyebrow. Zhuqing broke the communicator? Yes. Lin Chia sighed regretfully, taking out his pixel communicator from his pocket. Otherwise we could contact them directly now and ask about their plans. That's easy to fix. Snap. Jinian raised her hand and snapped her fingers in midair. Done. Jinian dusted off her hands and said casually. Lin Chia was stunned, and just as he was about to ask more, a thunderous explosion suddenly came from nearby. A blinding pillar of fire broke through the ground, separating the bottom level of the dungeon from this level, then pierced through several more layers, directly penetrating the entire abyss prison like a spear shooting into the sky. Terrifying divine power waves emanated from the fire pillar, and scorching heat swept through the second level. All the sub-god level prisoners and Lin Chia's group changed their expressions simultaneously. Did something happen to Xiao Nan? Lin Chia frowned. No, that's not it. The pixel cloak fluttered wildly around Jinian as she narrowed her eyes, looking toward the center of the fire pillar with a smile curling at her lips. Indeed, things are getting interesting. Within the raging fire pillar, 3 figures rushed up through the prison. Si Xiaonan rode the massive demon wolf Fenrir, steadily leaping from the bottom level to the surface of Asgard. 2 figures landed behind her. One was completely enveloped in flames, with a skinny frame and 4 long withered arms under dark golden burlap robes. The other was a giant at least 20 meters tall, wielding a heavy black hammer, with countless frost covering his mountain-like body forming thick ice armor. Each step he took made the ground violently tremble. Both of them emanated the pressure of major gods. Agni, the Indian fire god, and Ymir, the progenitor of frost giants. They were also imprisoned at the bottom level of the abyss prison. Jinian immediately recognized these 2 terrifying divine beings and spoke with surprise. Si Xiaonan rode Fenrir to where Lin Chia's group and Jinian stood, her lips barely moving as her voice sounded directly in their minds. Stay behind us later and try to avoid engaging in combat. Let these sub-gods and the 2 major gods handle the dangerous work first. Are those 2 major gods reliable? Lin Chia asked. They're fine. I made a deal with them. At least in Asgard our goals align. The bottom level of the prison must have held more than just those 2, right? Jinian recalled the deep dark cells at the bottom of the abyss prison and asked curiously, where are the others? The others weren't willing to follow my command. Releasing them rashly might cause unnecessary trouble. It's better to be cautious. After speaking, Si Xiaonan rode Fenrir and leaped to the front of the group. She turned her head, her gaze falling on the majestic divine mountain in the center of Asgard that reached into the clouds. She took a deep breath, her eyes flashing with sharp coldness. Asgard, I, Si Xiaonan, have returned. Rainbow Bridge. Among countless red brick walls, Zhou Ping carried a blood-stained sword, stepping over the corpse of a Norse god and walking forward expressionlessly. He sheathed his sword and looked down at the corner of his black shirt stained with divine blood, his face full of disgust. He rubbed it with his fingertips and sighed. I wonder if laundry detergent can remove stains left by god blood. Just then, the red brick walls on both sides suddenly began to flicker, like a disturbed old television. Streams of pale green code collapsed and all the nearby brick walls visibly became transparent. Seeing this, Zhou Ping looked up at the figure wearing a baseball cap in the sky. Has your mental power been exhausted? At the same time, other human powerhouses wandering in the red brick maze also noticed the maze receding. Fortunately, after continuous battles, most of the Norse gods who had initially rushed here were almost completely wiped out, with only a few sub-gods remaining, who were being frantically hunted down by Sun Wukong and Yang Jian. Guanzai in midair swayed and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face beneath the baseball cap turned pale, obviously having overexerted himself. A figure instantly broke through space and arrived beside him, supporting his body. Are you all right? Zhou Ping asked worriedly, carrying his sword case, letting Guanzai's blood drip onto his shirt. I'm fine. Just need to rest a bit. Guanzai smiled. Yuzhu Lingbai, Zhuqing and Qin Fuzi arrived in succession. The Queen Mother of the West stepped across several kilometers in one stride, holding the sacred rainbow sword, her gold-threaded purple robe immaculate. Queen Mother. Zhuqing cupped his hands respectfully. Loki is already dead. The the Queen Mother announced the bombshell news as soon as she spoke. Someone else killed him. Someone else? Who? Qin Fuzi lifted the carriage curtain and asked in surprise. The Queen Mother looked up in the distance, her expression somewhat complex. A little girl. Quite impressive. In that case, do we continue attacking or return to Great Xiao? Of course we continue attacking. A voice came from above. Sun Wukong carried his golden cudgel and slowly approached. The massive divine manifestation behind him gradually dissipated, but his dazzling golden eyes were still filled with fighting spirit. These foreign gods. Old Sun, haven't had enough killing yet. Yang Jian, holding his blood-stained three-pointed double-edged blade, slowly descended from the sky, his gaze sweeping over Sun Wukong as he calmly spoke. Already killed 2 main gods for secondary gods. It seems this time we're tied. Yang Jian and Sun Wukong, each fighting alone in the red brick maze, even after experiencing several fierce battles and being covered in wounds, but the Queen Mother of the West didn't immediately answer Zhuqing's question. She just silently gazed at the scattered divine palaces in the distance, and the towering divine mountain that reached the clouds as if deep in thought. Boom! Just then a blinding flash of light exploded from the edge of the horizon, the rumbling explosion causing Asgard's ground to tremble slightly. Countless Norse gods rushing toward the Rainbow Bridge suddenly changed direction, speeding toward where the flash appeared, as if a terrifying divine power disturbance was erupting from the deepest part of Asgard. What's happening? Master Qin stroked his beard and asked in surprise, is Asgard experiencing internal strife at this time? This doesn't seem like internal strife. Zhuqing's eyes narrowed slightly, vaguely seeing several figures fighting within the flashing light. Suddenly Zhuqing froze, reaching into his pocket to pull out that cracked pixel walkie-talkie. Under everyone's watchful eyes, the walkie-talkie transformed into countless pixels, automatically dispersing, then reassembling into various components, rapidly reconstructing in his hand, and in just 5 or 6 seconds, it returned to its original form. Jinyan. Zhuqing's eyes lit up. After the chaotic static, a girl's voice came through from the other end of the walkie-talkie. Hello? Are you there? Are you there? Jin Yan's familiar and energetic voice immediately attracted everyone's attention. Zhuqing promptly pressed the walkie-talkie button. This is Zhuqing. Jin Yan, can you hear me? Half a second later, the voice came through again. I can hear you, looks like it's really fixed. Damn. Someone's ambushing me. Boom boom boom. Consecutive explosions came through from the other side of the walkie-talkie, faintly mixed with the roars of Norse gods, and Jin Yan's curses gradually drowned out by the rumbling of artillery fire. The faces of the human sealing experts changed. What's going on? Where is she? Guanzai asked with furrowed brows. Sounds like she's in the middle of a chaotic battlefield. Zhou Ping thoughtfully stroked his chin, looking up toward the turbulent core area of Asgard, his eyebrows slightly raised. She couldn't be. She's there. Zhuqing gripped the walkie-talkie tightly, about to say something more when another voice came through from the other end. Damn it, how do you use this thing? Ho. Can you hear your young master speaking? It's Bailey Pang Pang. Zhou Ping immediately recognized his student's voice, his eyes brightening as he took the walkie-talkie. I can hear you, this is Zhou Ping. Master Swordsman. It really is you. From the other end, Bailey Pong Pong's voice was full of joy. Master Swordsman, do you know how hard we've been looking for you? We've been through heaven and hell, and also. Let's not talk about that now. What's your current situation? Oh, Si Xiaonan is leading more than a dozen criminal gods rescued from the Abyss prison, heading toward the Divine Mountain for revenge. Bailey Pang Pang paused. Jin Yan was holding the walkie-talkie earlier, but she was ambushed by a Norse god who broke through the blockade. Now she's fighting, and I just happened to pick up this walkie-talkie. Si Xiaonan. Zhou Ping was unfamiliar with this name. Zhuqing took back the walkie-talkie. What about Lin Jie? Is he with you too? He's also. Boom. On the other side of the walkie-talkie, before Bailey Pang Pang could finish, a piercing sonic boom was heard, followed by endless howling wind. Hello? Bailey Pang Pang. Can you hear me? Zhuqing asked anxiously. He. It's Chao Yuan, Zhou Ping said with certainty. He's gone crazy again. Zhuqing. After another rush of wind, a familiar voice came through again. Commander Zwa, this is Lin Chia. Hearing this voice, Suqing finally sighed in relief. Lin Chia, what was that situation just now? A secondary god dropped a divine artifact causing some trouble. But Pang Pang wasn't seriously injured. Chao Yuan tossed the walkie-talkie to me. Lin Chia's voice was serious. Commander Zwa, the situation is quite dire. Gods from the giant realm, dwarf realm, and the underworld are arriving one after another. Si Xiaonan's temporary rebel army alone probably can't hold out for long. Lin Chia quickly summarized the situation for everyone. Suqing looked up with a grave expression at the Queen Mother of the West beside him. Although he was the commander-in-chief of Daxia's Night Watchers, when it came to dealing with divine realms, the Queen Mother of Daxia's heavenly court clearly had more authority. The Queen Mother of the West frowned in thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Now that the Holy Rainbow Sword is in our hands, and Asgard has no supreme being presiding, even if the situation is dangerous, we should be able to escape unharmed. This is a rare opportunity, let's take the risk. If we can damage Asgard's divine source or national fortune, then the Norse gods will never again pose a threat to Daxia." Suqing immediately understood the Queen Mother's meaning and said to Lin Chia, "Lin Chia, hold on a little longer. We'll attack from the other side and meet up with you." Understood. Hearing this, Sun Wukong's lips curled into a faint smile, his mighty divine power carrying surging battle intent, bursting forth from his blazing eyes. Things are getting more and more interesting. Including Jin Yan, our human sealing experts are now all gathered in Asgard. Suqing turned his head toward the direction of Asgard's disturbance, his right hand gripping the hilt of his sword at his waist tightening. 7 human sealing experts joining forces is a first in history, plus a special squad. I wonder if this time we can bring back a surprise for Daxia. We'll do our best. Zhou Ping formed a sword finger, his black shirt fluttering in the wind. Everyone, I'm eager to save my students, so I'll go ahead first. Ding. A crisp sword chime echoed through the sky as Zhou Ping's figure transformed into a beam of sword light, instantly darting forward. Xiao Hailai, Yang Jian called softly, and a massive black hound appeared in midair. He flipped onto the back of the ferocious beast, and together with Sun Wukong riding his somersault cloud, they raced one after another toward the direction of the disturbance. The many human sealing experts followed closely behind. Asgard. Eternal Garden. A figure in a gray coat walked through the muddy garden, clear spring water flowing from fingertips, sprinkled like fine rain across every corner of the garden. The breeze began to rise, blowing through messy golden hair. Bragi stood on the barren soil looking back toward the distance. Beneath the low-hanging clouds, faint rumbling sounds came from afar. The decaying wooden cabin creaked slightly with the trembling earth, as if it might collapse at any moment. Bragi turned his gaze away, glanced at the wooden cabin in front of him and sighed. This house needs renovation. With all that commotion outside, you're still here watering flowers? Aren't you curious? On the blue-gray stone path, Urd, the goddess of past, asked with confusion. Curious about what? The situation in Asgard. I'm not interested. Bragi shook his head, his fingertips continuing to move gracefully through the air. With each wave, spring water transformed into rain, moistening every corner of the soil. He wore a simple gray coat, standing there like a quiet conductor, sowing seeds of life upon the desolate earth. Whether Loki or Thor wins, it doesn't matter to me. I only hope that when my wife returns, this garden will be restored to its original state. If she sees the garden we built together reduced to this miserable condition, she'll be heartbroken. Bragi's eyes were filled with tenderness. The past, Goddess Urd watched Bragi as he concentrated on watering, her expression somewhat complex. Brother Bragi, can I plant flowers with you? Skuld, the goddess of future with 2 colorful braids, appeared from somewhere carrying a packet of marigold seeds, running to Bragi's side and tilting her head as she asked. Bragi smiled gently, reaching out to pat her head. Of course you can. Skuld cheered, excitedly running across the soil with her marigold seeds, occasionally throwing handfuls toward the sky with her small hands full of energy. Bragi guided the water flow, irrigating the soil where Skuld had scattered seeds, while a faint rainbow floated above the wooden cabin. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Subtle sounds emerged from the soil as green sprouts broke through the surface, like hope emerging from ruins, growing one after another. Bragi froze, then widened his eyes in disbelief. They're sprouting already? How is that possible? This child controls the law of accelerated time. The past, Goddess Urd watched Skuld running and laughing, a fond smile appearing at the corner of her mouth. With her here, your garden will likely be in full bloom in less than an hour. Wonderful, wonderful. Bragi clapped his hands repeatedly, his joy evident. As if remembering something, he turned to Urd. By the way, where is Verdandi? She's watching over Asgard, Urd replied calmly. It seems some great Sia gods have broken in. We three goddesses never interfere in Nordic internal wars, but if foreign enemies invade, she won't stand idly by. Great Sia gods. Hearing these words, the image of Sun Wukong immediately appeared in Bragi's mind. I wonder if that monkey has come here? What about you? Why didn't you go? I need to stay here, to protect you, Urd said calmly. What she called protection was actually close surveillance. Skuld had prophesied that Bragi would become the source of Ragnarok. Even though they had taken action to delay the coming of Ragnarok, it still wasn't foolproof. So Urd voluntarily stayed behind to watch Bragi, preventing him from taking any unplanned actions. As for Skuld, she was a child with little fighting ability, so naturally she stayed by Urd's side. Bragi nodded, saying nothing more, just following closely behind Skuld, continuously watering the seeds in the soil. Amid Skuld's silver bell-like laughter, this desolate land gradually came back to life. Bang! Fenrir savagely bit into the void, instantly tearing the shoulder of an approaching dwarf deity into a mist of blood. The roaring divine powers collided, causing surrounding temples to collapse one after another. Dust mixed with crimson blood mist rose into the air as a girl in a blood-stained black coat stood on the magic wolf's back, rushing forward. Behind her, several figures followed closely. This team of more than 10 people was like a sharp sword, pointing directly at the center of Asgard. Even though gods continuously came to block them, Asgard's main forces had already been routed in the battle at the Rainbow Bridge. These gods rushing in from other places had no leadership and were like scattered sand. They posed little threat to this group of desperate criminals. Fatty, are you all right with that wound? Lin Chia, riding on the somersault cloud, looked back at Bailey Pang Pang, who was groaning and holding his waist. It's nothing, just grazed by that spear, and Qingyu, who was bandaging him, answered before Bailey Pang Pang could respond. I've mastered several healing-type forbidden domains that can heal him, though it might hurt a bit. As soon as the words fell, Bailey Pang Pang let out a scream of agony. Hee! Chao Yuan's silly laughter rang out at the perfect time. Just as Lin Chia was about to say something more, his peripheral vision caught something above, and his pupils suddenly contracted. Without thinking, he kicked away the laughing Chao Yuan while dispersing the somersault cloud beneath his feet. His body twisted half a circle in mid-air, retreating backward in a strange posture. Almost simultaneously, a flash of gray appeared in Qingyu's eyes. He grabbed Bailey Pang Pang's shoulder and flew sideways for hundreds of meters like a startled swan, leaving only afterimages suspended in the air, which were torn to pieces by a brown spear shadow descending from the sky. The brown spear shadow passed 10 meters from Lin Chia's body, its divine light instantly cutting a deep, bone-exposing wound across his back. Had he been even slightly slower, he would have been torn to pieces. In this critical moment, Lin Chia also saw the full appearance of the brown spear shadow. It was a spear carved from a tree branch. The tree branch spear flashed across the sky like lightning, reducing the temple below to ruins. A figure in a green divine robe appeared out of thin air on the ground, slowly pulling out that tree branch spear. His eyes narrowed as he gazed at Lin Chia in the sky, seeming somewhat surprised. Lin Chia recognized this man. Just this morning they had worked together. The forest god Vidar. As expected from Prophet Miles, who has been playing us like a fiddle, he's quite skilled. Vera expressively held her spear-like branch and spoke flatly. Lin Chia's heart immediately sank. Vera's appearance meant that the gods on Thor's side had already begun to take action. Although Asgard currently has no supreme god, the number of deities here, including the main gods, is still the highest among all divine realms on Earth. However, after Odin's death, these deities were left without leadership and mostly divided into 3 factions. One supporting Loki, one supporting Thor, and others choosing to remain neutral and observe. Despite being three factions, Lin Chia had long observed that the truly top-tier combat gods were scattered between the first two camps, such as Hela the queen of the underworld, Tyr the god of war, Balder the god of light, Vera the forest goddess. Only entities like the three goddesses who remained untainted by worldly affairs, along with weaker or non-combat deities, chose neutrality. The gods on Loki's side had already been mostly killed in the Rainbow Bridge battle, and the remaining ones disappeared with Loki's death. Now the biggest problem was Thor's faction, whose strength remained fully intact. And Loki's death also meant that Thor had completely lost his competitor and would take control of all of Asgard. Lin Chia didn't know what Thor had been doing during his disappearance, but since the forest goddess Vera had appeared, it meant he had finished whatever he was doing. After this he would inevitably, as the sole heir to the throne, lead all remaining Asgardian gods to surround and eliminate Si Xiaonan and the forces from Great Xia. In other words, the previously scattered Norse gods were now showing signs of uniting, which was undoubtedly bad news for them. As it turned out, Lin Chia's concerns were not unfounded. After the forest goddess Vera appeared, several streaks of light crossed the sky in succession, surrounding Si Xiaonan and her group. The war god Tyr gripped his sword, coldly looking at Lin Chia in the distance, his face showing unprecedented anger. The people were deceived by Lin Chia. The bridge was opened by Lin Chia. The prison was also raided by Lin Chia. It could be said that Asgard's greatest crisis in hundreds of years was caused single-handedly by this great Xia person disguised as a prophet, and he had been openly following them, using so-called prophecies to play them like puppets. This was a tremendous insult to Thor and all the gods on his side. Compared to Si Xiaonan, who led the rebellion, and those serious criminals who escaped from prison, the one they hated most was still Lin Chia. Seemingly aware of the gods' murderous gazes, Lin Chia quietly stepped back half a pace, hiding behind several lesser god criminals. Lord Thor has ascended as the God King, and all Norse gods now follow his command. It's time to end this farce. Tyr's gaze swept over the criminals below as he coldly said, "Those who surrender now and return to the Abyss prison will not be held accountable for what just happened. Otherwise, you will be executed on the spot." The many lesser god criminals present changed their expressions, with some of their eyes flickering, seemingly wavering. So what if Thor has become the God King? Si Xiaonan stood on the demon wolf's back and calmly spoke. "He is still not the supreme. With just you people, you may not be able to stop us." "Hee, now it's your turn to speak?" War god Tyr looked at Si Xiaonan and sneered. "You're just a human who stole Loki's divine law to become a god. Have you forgotten how you were beaten to near death by Lord Thor in the temple? If Lord Thor hadn't been merciful, you would be a corpse by now. You think a few humans and some escaped prison rats can make any waves in the Norse realm?" Before Tyr's words had fallen, a sword light instantly flashed across the sky, appearing before his brow in the blink of an eye. The sword's speed was incredibly fast. So fast that the blade had almost touched Tyr's brow before he could barely see the sword's shape. At the same time, a crisp sword hum broke through the clouds, echoing in everyone's ears. Ding! Tyr's pupils suddenly contracted, his divine power explosively erupting as he dodged sideways with astonishing speed. Even so, the sword's edge still cut through the skin and flesh of his left face, instantly leaving a deep, bloody gash that exposed bone. Tyr retreated several miles abruptly, cold sweat seeping from his temples. Still shaken, he watched as the sword light arced through the air, returning to the hand of a black-robed figure walking through the void in the distance. "You." Tyr saw the person and was first stunned, then showed a look of astonishment. Zhou Ping carried a sword case on his back, holding a sword in one hand as he slowly walked on nothingness. "They alone may not be enough. But what about if you add us?" As his words fell, two magnificent figures flew across the sky, terrifying divine might pouring down like a tsunami, transforming into two great Xia divine shadows enveloped in godly light. One carried a golden red staff on his shoulder, wearing golden armor, his eyes shining like two blazing suns. The other wore silver armor and robes, wielding a three-pointed double-edged blade, with a vertical pupil opening from his brow, emanating vast divine might. "Holy shit, so cool." On the ground, Jin Yen saw Sun Wukong and Yang Jian standing side by side, his eyes immediately lighting up like stars. In contrast, War God Tyr's face grew increasingly grim. The Rainbow Bridge battle and the Abyss Prison uprising had already severely weakened Asgard. Now with these two forces joining together, it undoubtedly presented a huge problem for them. Kill them, he coldly uttered these 4 words, and the many gods of Thor's faction surrounding them rushed forward together. Sun Wukong and Yang Jian exchanged glances, their divine manifestations simultaneously rising behind them, directly crashing into the multitude of gods. Break through. Si Xiaonan stood on Fenrir's back, seeing this scene, immediately roared, her form leaping upward. The other criminals, seeing great Xia gods coming to their aid, immediately stabilized their morale, grinning as they followed closely behind, engaging in battle with the gods filling the sky. At the same time, another sword light pierced through the void again, heading straight for Tyr's face. This time Tyr was prepared, quickly raising his sword to block the dark golden ancient sword hovering in the air, releasing surging divine power. Zhou Ping, don't go too far. Tyr stared fixedly at the black-clad figure standing firmly in the distance, gritting his teeth. Seeing this, Zhou Ping smiled slightly. 2 years ago when you had both hands intact you were no match for me. Now what do you have to stop me? Sacred Mountain. The winding stone steps extended upward from the ground, like a long ladder to heaven, stretching into the clouds. At the end of the stone steps at the highest peak of Asgard, a magnificent and splendid temple stood tall. Standing at the entrance of this temple and looking down, one could take in the entire view of the divine realm. This temple was only inhabited by generations of god kings, and its previous owner was Odin. Thor stood at the temple entrance, gazing at the chaotic battlefield below. His golden curls swayed in the mountain breeze, his cape like a bright red splash against the sacred hull, dazzling to behold. Thor, can they hold on? Sif gently embraced Thor's waist from behind, asking with concern. Yes, Thor replied with certainty. Even though consecutive troubles have caused heavy losses to the gods, Asgard is still the world's top divine realm and won't collapse so easily. Now that I have inherited the position of God King, all hearts are united. They will eventually perish under the Norse gods. Thor raised his fingertips and hazy phantasmal lights condensed from nothingness, like a vast ocean floating beside him. A prism-like transparent crystal rose from this ocean, and under Thor's guidance, gradually flew toward the top of the temple. Since he had inherited the position of God King, Asgard's divine source naturally should return to the God King's temple with him. As the prism crystal slowly embedded itself in the depression at the top of the temple, gorgeous phantasmal light gradually lit up along the gray-blue patterns, instantly covering the entire temple. Inside the vast and spacious temple, the prism's source radiated light. Those patterns flowing with phantasmal light seemed like the temple's blood vessels, pulsing with the flickering frequency of the source. After returning the source to its original position, a small purple crystal floated up from Thor's palm and drifted directly toward the divine realm's source. This was the soul of Idun brought by Bragi. Can Idun really be resurrected by nourishing from the divine realm's source? Sif couldn't help but ask. I don't know, but since Bragi said so, we just need to follow his instructions. Thor shook his head. Anyway, it won't cause any loss to Asgard. After the purple crystal merged into the source's phantasmal sea, Thor turned around to look down at the battlefield, dark purple lightning flashing in the depths of his eyes. Stay here. I'll go down to help them. He reached out and summoned a small silver hammer into his hand. Just as he was about to rush down the mountain, a sigh came from behind them. Ah! Upon hearing this voice, Thor and Sif were simultaneously startled, their pupils slightly contracting. Tyr, Vidar, and the others had already gone with other gods to intercept the enemies. This god king's temple should only have the 2 of them. Where did this sigh come from? Thor immediately tightened his grip on the silver hammer's handle, intense lightning bursting forth. He turned sharply to look behind him, about to strike, but froze in place the moment he saw the figure. On the ruins of the once white divine throne, a familiar figure wearing tattered divine robes stood there. Crimson insects writhed frantically in his eye sockets as he gazed at Thor and Sif below with a complex expression. Father! Thor exclaimed in shock. Standing in the God King's temple was none other than Asgard's previous God King, Thor's father. Since Odin had left after being hunted by the Moral Celestial, he had never appeared in Asgard again. Many Norse gods speculated that he was probably dead or had been chased to other places and would never return. But Thor never expected that at this critical moment Odin would come back. Standing at the temple entrance, Thor didn't know what attitude to take toward Odin. That was his father, Asgard's previous god-king, the being he once most admired. But equally, that was also the one who betrayed Asgard, single-handedly created the mist disaster, and almost destroyed the entire Norse realm as a Cthulhu ally. Thor. Odin looked at Thor, seemingly disappointed. I never expected that you would be the one to control Asgard in the end. I thought it would be Loki standing here. Hearing Odin's words, Thor was stunned, his expression turning unpleasant. Father, don't you believe in me? Thor frowned seriously. With me as God King, Asgard will only grow stronger. Loki's personality makes him completely unsuitable to be king. Odin shook his head and slowly spoke. On the matter of being God King, I believe you can definitely do better than Loki, even better than I did. Unfortunately, you've misunderstood one thing, Thor. What I need is not a God King who can lead Asgard to greater prosperity, but a hand that can manipulate the Norse gods for me. Father, I don't understand what you mean. Thor's frown deepened. Odin stared at Thor without speaking further, and the God King's temple fell into dead silence. Faint rumbling sounds came from below the mountain. After an unknown period, Odin's deep voice sounded again. Thor, my dear child, are you willing to follow me and rebuild a truly existing Asgard? Sword chimes rang consecutively above the clouds. In the sky, a figure broke through the cloud layer, falling like a meteor. War god Tyr's sword-wielding hand trembled slightly, dense sword wounds covering his entire body, making him look extremely disheveled. He stared fixedly at the figure carrying a black box that followed closely behind, his eyes filled with unwillingness and rage. Dust flew up everywhere and a low roar came from the ground. He rushed back into the clouds, fearlessly flying toward that heaven-shocking sword. This guy is really tough, still jumping around after being cut 7 or 8 times by the sword saint. Li Pang sat on the somersault cloud holding his wound and couldn't help but complain at this sight. Lin Chia carefully drove the somersault cloud and said, among the Norse gods, there are quite a few powerful main gods. Their strength cannot be underestimated. Just as Lin Chia was speaking, a stream of light crossed the sky and crashed heavily onto the ground not far away. As the hazy dust cleared, a tall, long-haired goddess, holding a spear, slowly walked out. The moment Lin Chia saw the goddess's face, he was slightly stunned. It's her. Chao Yuan, who had returned to normal, was regulating his body on the somersault cloud. His peripheral vision swept over the goddess's direction and he couldn't help but stare. He opened his mouth slightly and asked in surprise, Chia, you know her? Yes, Lin Chia nodded. The goddess of present. Verdandi.